Good day and welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. Now, before I get into the rest of this video, I'd like to ask you all to please leave a like and comment on my video, and let's continue with the Floor of Death. Now, the first part of the Floor of Death has been a little bit rough for me, so let's see if I can wrap this up quite nicely getting into the second part. Now, entering the Floor of Death, we already know that there's three teams basically in the running. Karaka and White, the Slayers, Rachel and her team with Wagner and Yura, whatever they're up to try and get the Thorn, and the last is Balm. Now, Balm's team ends up being separated into two parts, with Yuri taking a different part, and we're about to touch Yuri, Karaka, and Rachel all at once in this one piece of the story. So Yuri and the rest of the regulars end up falling into the floor through a different route. At this point on the floor, Yuri ends up going through a fight with the parasites of the floor, and she finds out that they're immortal. Now, the reason why they're immortal is they don't have a soul within their body. So their soulless bodies can keep reincarnating no matter how many times you beat them. But we later told by Harwin that there's limitations to this endless immortality of theirs. It's not so perfect that it's above anything else in the tower. It's nothing near the 10 Great Warriors level of immortality. When it comes to their brand of immortality, they can't be hurt or they can't be killed on this floor. Now, that is all that we are told about it. And one of the other things about this entire situation is the spell that has been put on this floor. Now, Gustang is directly involved in it. He is the one who made this spell. So it works as follows. The souls of everybody on the floor of death are taken away from them, and they cannot leave the floor of death. That means that nobody on the outside is going to enter in and find out what happened over here. And they can't tell anybody on the outside what is going on because they can't leave. Also, there's gatekeepers in place on any entrance so that they will take the souls of those who are trying to enter. And that's the whole way that things are working. Now, Haljo is a special case. Haljo was helped by Yurik Mazino, giving him the power of the Red Rissa. Now, Yurik is really in big trouble for this one because he messed up royally. I'm not even joking, he's made such a big mess on this floor. It's not even a joke to say that it is a mess up upon a mess up. Right, so that's all I'm going to say about it. Sorry about that. So Yurik has messed up over here. When he came to the floor of death previously, he ended up falling in love with Karam Jahad, right? So we know that that's who his love interest is. We know who Mr. Super Chad is after. And yeah, that's Yurik Mazino. On this floor, he's not so intimidating. He's not as crazy as he sounds before. But nonetheless, Yurik ends up coming to the floor, and he finds a whole repairman called Haljo. While Haljo is moving around and flirting around, he also ends up finding the Red Rissa, which is a fragment of the administrator. So he decides he's going to help this fragment of the administrator come back to power by binding it to a host. And the host is chosen for it is Haljo, because Haljo is someone whose ambitions are very large. They remind him of himself. And he ends up giving him this power to pull him up all the way to the level of a very powerful individual. I say that he's about 10% of any regular's power. That's how powerful Haljo is. So yeah, 10% of Yurik Mazino at least. So crazy powerful. He might even be able to put up a little bit of a fight against someone like Gustang. So nonetheless, that's what we get from this entire situation. Now, beyond all of this, Haljo decided he wanted to get freedom from this floor, and he wanted the rest of them to get out so they can climb the tower, become rankers, enjoy their lives, continue on with existence. And the Grand Family ended up putting things in place to force things so that they would always work in only one way. So we find out that all the Leech Guardians that are defending the floor lack intelligence because their souls have been stirred and taken out of their bodies and placed into these objects, or the connection between their soul and their body was removed, so that they would end up not being able to remember anything and they wouldn't be able to rebel. So it tells you that this entire floor of death has been manipulated so that freedom could never be achieved. It's basically giving them the choice by removing the choice because they don't know that they really had a choice. It's complicated, but that's what they're doing on the floor of death. Very similar to real life governments they make you believe that you actually have a choice in what's going on, but they've already predetermined that you can't beat them, and it's a whole lot of a mess. It's drawing parallels to reality. That's what books are good for. They can tell you something about reality that you can't really say out loud most of the time. But nonetheless, that's what's happening here in the Hell Floor. That's what the Grand Family ended up doing. And Haljo gets really, really depressed after he loses an election against one of the Grand Family members. And he feels that the people on the floor are afraid of him because of his power, which is true. So he ends up using his power. And when he does this here, he ends up bonding properly with the Red Thrissa, which is a fragment of a guardian, the floor guardian for the floor of death. And they end up becoming really powerful. As I said, 10% of irregular like Yurik Mazino, which is most probably nothing next to Enryu. So nonetheless, this is where we're sitting with everything that's happening on the other side. Princess Yuri ends up fighting these Leech Guardians, and they end up really being tough, and being unable to defeat them makes them impossible to get through. They end up being helped by a Red Witch guide who pulls them through to the Red Witch city, the gallbladder city inside the administrator's dead body. They end up using it as their headway point where they're going to lead a charge on Haljo's castle, because Arwen is manipulating the situation. I explain the manipulation after the saga is over. So nonetheless, they go through with all of this, and she basically tells them to take out Haljo. And the way to destroy their immortality, because it's based on a spell, is to use something greater than the power of the spell. Something like a 13-month series weapon ignition. And at this point, we find out that Yuri has never been able to ignite her weapons. They just don't listen to her. They don't like her. And she lied on a call, and Evan heard her saying that she ignited her weapons. I think it was to Rapalista. And at this point, her lie ends up causing more havoc for her because everyone believes she can ignite it. So nonetheless, this is what happens, and Yuri is given this chance to go and fight with her 13-month weapons. Her 13-month weapons are the Green April and the Black March. So Yuri ends up charging Haljo's castle, and they start fighting. Now this fight is around the same time that Bam enters the castle for Dija. Now let's get back to Karaka. Karaka ends up entering in through a secret way that Fug knows into the Floor of Death that Haljo opened for them. It's also the same way in which they smuggled out the thorns to Madarako, who is the one who did it, who delivered it to the workshop where they got the first piece of the thorn. There's one more left on the Floor of Death. There's two more out there somewhere in the tower. Now we know that this story is going to take us through the tower to different floors in different locations, and we know that things are going to get crazy in a few chapters. We know that this is going to happen because there is no way they can avoid it, because at this point Bam is going to really need those thorn fragments, and they're going to have to show up some way or another, because if Bam doesn't get the rest of the thorn fragments, he's never going to reach his full potential. He's already quite far up the tower, as we can see. This is the 43rd floor of the tower, and when he completes this journey, he's going to be on the 44th floor. They're going to continue climbing up the tower for another 10 years, and he might reach the 50th or 60th floor. They see class regulars, that's halfway to A rank. Obviously, with all of this being said, that makes it ridiculously hard to say where Bam is in terms of physical power. No, not physical power, in terms of need of power. But it gets more crazy at the end of this. You'll find out why it becomes so insane. So nonetheless, all of this goes down, and Karaka ends up getting into the floor with Rachel and Yura. They end up going to Haljo's castle, where they basically tell Haljo there's someone who can break the magic on your seal. He is on the other side. He's referring to Bam at this point. If he attacks the seal, he can break it, and you can actually pull your souls out of the soul jar, and you can actually leave this floor of death without the ladle, the soul stirring ladle. At this point, Haljo takes that opportunity to make a threat. Basically, he's got the last thorn fragment. If you want it, come fight. And he also basically says that Karaka should help in this fight and fight on this battle platform, basically. So He's intending to use the power of Karaka to get his way. Nonetheless, Karaka has another sneaky plan to revive the power of White so that he can go back onto the Hell train and forcefully absorb his last clone, who is Albelda mixed with all the other souls he's consumed in his life. Now, the plan is as follows. If White goes and eats all the souls in the soul room, in the spirit jar that they have, then White will be able to regain a lot of his former power. Then he can leave the floor of death, get onto the train, find his last clone, slay his clone basically by forcefully integrating with it, and he can be a slayer again with way greater power than what he had. So he thinks about all of this, he calculates it out in his head, and he's like, right, let's go for it. And they end up getting help from one of Aljo's servants because they lied to him that they have a way to release them from their imprisonment. And that's what they're going to do. So they start heading that way and they start walking through underground caverns into Dija's castle. Now let's get into Dija's castle. In Dija's castle, Rachel ends up making a split from Karaka's group and running to where Bam is. And at the same time, Bam is almost at Dija himself, right at the bottom of the castle with Mata and Hockney. When Rachel comes in and they have a little argument, it pushes Bam a little bit in terms of emotion, and he says that literally they are enemies. They end up going to meet Dija. Dija actually explains that Rachel has a dirty heart and she definitely can't be the savior. But nonetheless, Bam says give her a fair fighting chance. You know, that's how it can go. She tries to turn the whole story around that Bam has stolen her future from her. You get it, she's a very bitter and horrible individual. So nonetheless, things go a little bit south on this crazy section of the Floor of Death. So at this point, Bam ends up in a bit of a predicament because he has to take Rachel with him on this entire quest. So they decide they're going to do whatever Dija says to earn the last Thorn Fragment location so they can go and pick it up. And the test is quite simple in terms of instruction. Punish Aljo for what he's done. And with this here, everybody goes into the crazy mode. Yuri is fighting against Aljo at the castle. She ends up igniting 2 of the 13-month series, which ends up triggering the curse of the 13 months, which is a spirit who will take over your body and do crazy things with your body. She ends up killing several members of the Floor of Death, which drives them insane. Bam ends up arriving at Aljo's castle to save Dija and to fight Aljo at the same time. They find out that he can kill immortals as well, which makes it even more insane and more crazy difficult to handle. Kun and everybody is also in the castle to go and save Disha, because they figured if they save Disha, he'll give them the soul-stirring ladle, which Harwin has planned to use to buy back a piece of the thorn. So she's going to use it to get another thorn fragment for Bam, and that'll get Bam up to 3 thorn fragments, making him the most powerful version of himself that they can have currently. With 3 thorn fragments powering him up, he'll be more stable, but he can also grow much faster, much quicker. And he'll be able to reach magnificent heights when it comes to his physical strength. Plus, it'll give him a new power, obviously, when he achieves more thorns. So nonetheless, he ends up fighting here. They end up fighting here. And from Dija, he has a son, Dili, who ends up going with Bam and Rachel. And when he finds out about what Kun and Harwin are trying, he ends up fighting them. And at this point, they end up breaking up into 2 teams. Kun and Rachel start fighting Dili. He uses his inner core to trap him, and Dili, for some reason, has an invisible observer that is outside of his range that he is able to send after Kun, which makes no sense because he should have been trapped within the inner core and he should have been struggling to get his observer out. And that is the reality behind it. It should have trapped him inside the inner core perfectly, but it's another loophole in the way the story was written. Unless he already sent it scouting, which I doubt he would have, because he didn't really have any time, and he would have told them that he's scouting the area so they have a clear path on where they need to go. Man, this is so hard. So nonetheless, at this point, everybody is in a crazy rush to get things done. Bam is moving towards fighting Aljo, and he goes and he ends up helping Yuri break free of the curse of the 13 months. Just his touch instantly pulls her out of it, and for some reason Garam is really shocked because she knows that the 13 months is there to haunt everybody but the true master of the 13 month series. Whoever the true master will be, when he gathers them, he won't suffer the curse of the 13 months. And Bam is totally immune to curses, so he won't be able to suffer the curse of the 13 months, meaning he's possibly the true wielder of the 13 month series weapons. Okay, so this whole fight goes down, and eventually Garam, Yuri, and Bam start running away from Haljo because he's way too powerful. He ends up sucking the Shinsu out of the area, which makes everybody useless except for Bam. Eventually, Hockney explains the whole situation to Garam that she needs to go to another area, and she'll find somebody there to help her, who's Yurik. Now, Yurik ends up jumping into the floor of death, and he ends up running into Karaka while he's busy abusing Yuraha. And at this point, Yurik just flicks one finger against Karaka and saying, using sneaky, dirty tricks isn't going to count. You're not going to get a wing from me. And at this point, Karaka is like, oh no, we need to get out of here. He's crazy powerful. He's ridiculously powerful. But he's wearing an ankle bracelet that's actually suppressing his power, or suppressing the impact of his power, so you can't sense that he's there. He ends up saving Wagnan, Yuraha, and what is her name again? Miseng. Karaka ends up taking White with him and fleeing from the situation after detonating most of his body, leaving himself as just a head. So nonetheless, he does this here and he ends up running away with White to the Soul Room. So at the same point, the fight is going crazy on the other side. Yurik ends up sneaking through one of the passages and he ends up hearing Yura. And at this point, he is like, oh no, she's going to catch me. I should rather just leave. I should give up right now instead of doing anything further. And Yura ends up doing exactly what Hockney says, giving a perfect message, and Yurik ends up joining the fight. Now, when Yurik fights Haljo, this is one of the most crucial and most important moments in the saga. Obviously, there's a whole lot of backstory to what is going on between them, but nonetheless, when they start fighting, Yurik just is only using 5% of his power, so he doesn't break the anklet that he has on. He ends up taking it off and losing it on this floor, if I'm correct. And at this point, this is where things go totally berserk. The fight between Haljo and Yurik is insane. It's on destroyer level. They can destroy half a floor if they fight properly. And basically we find out that the Red Theresa is a fragment of the old administrator trying to cling to life, and that it wasn't able to break the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Life, death, rebirth, life, death, rebirth. And when Yurik helped it, it ended up getting into Haljo, and it ended up taking over Haljo's mind partially, and Haljo and the Red Theresa were now one, in thought, in memory, in everything. So nonetheless, Yurik ends up fighting him and takes off his ankle bracelet that is resisting his Shinsu, and he ends up really dominating Haljo. Bam helps in this fight majorly using Shinsu Black Hole Sphere to create an opening so that Yurik can actually knock Haljo down and get rid of the Red Theresa. The Red Theresa ends up joining with Bam at the end of that fight. On the other side, Rachel is stung by Dealey's observer, which is poison. He also ends up breaking Kun's lighthouse, and they end up fighting with Dealey a little bit before this entire craziness with all the Shinsu being sucked out of the floor. Nonetheless, at this point, when all of this fighting is done, White ends up stealing the souls from the spirit room and ends up running away. Now, I'm actually going to leave everything at this point for this part because the last part will actually explain the prelude to the hidden floor. The hidden floor will be a 3-part, most likely from me. It's going to be the standard, what we're seeing, then it's going to be what we didn't see, and obviously, you know how it goes. And then I'm going to talk about all the hidden plots that are within this sector of the story, or this arc of the story. So I hope that you are all ready to explore the hidden floor after this, because we are about to wrap up the Floor of Death.